Hey guys, I'm hoping that my audio seems to be working. Yeah, hey everyone. Just if anyone can confirm in the chat that that the audio is coming through, then we'll get rolling. Sound is great. Cool. All right. So yeah, welcome to this. I think this is like the third live stream I've done for Q&A. It's obviously it's titled the birthday live stream. So a week ago was actually my birthday, but also it's a birthday of going full time because it was in March 2020 that I went full time. That first full time episode was the work of Gurdjieff, so it's always a nice birthday thing on March that I made that decision. So it's always fun. Any questions that people have that they want to ask me, just bung them in the chat. I have got the chat up, so let me know. And if the Shire music is too loud or isn't loud enough, then let me know. But I'll jump in with basically any questions. But I've got some that people have been asking me, and this is one that someone asked me about 3 times. So I have to make sure. I didn't think it was all that important, but they seem to think it was. So I've got to make sure I get it in here. Someone asked me, what does my sleep schedule look like, and how do you wind down before bed? There seems to be audio feedback. There shouldn't be an audio feedback. I don't. Let me. There's a voice repeating in the background. I know what it is. There you go. Should be gone. It might not update straight away with you guys, but yeah, it'll be gone now. Someone asked, what does my sleep schedule look like, and how do you wind down before bed? Do I have a morning routine? My sleep schedule, the last 2 months has been dreadful, and I finally found the cause, which was the kidney stone. So it's sort of back to normal. Yeah, I did have the stream open in another tab. I've muted that now. So just let me know if the feedback is gone completely, but it should be good. Yeah, it's gone. Cool. So my sleep schedule is sort of back to what it was, and my sleep schedule really at the moment is sort of like go to bed around 1 or 2 a.m. and get up around between 7 and 9, 7 and 10. I don't like sleeping. I like sleep, don't get me wrong. I like sleep, and I can sleep for England. But I don't like sleeping because I like being alive and not wasting time. So there's that. How do I wind down before bed? I tend to not wind down before bed, which is really bad. I mean, actually, bring in a bit of Gurdjieffian theory just to kick us off in the deep end of things. Gurdjieff basically used to argue that no one actually really needs more than between 1 and 6 hours sleep a night. And the reason that people need a lot of sleep is because that their emotions, their intellect, or their physical body is still working in some way. So if you're having dreams, he's saying that your intellect and your emotions are still working. So you're still working whilst you're asleep, and that's why you need so much. Whereas if you could truly shut off everything in your body, your mind, your emotions, and your body, then you would only need an hour. And he used to say that the amount of sleep that children need is if they held a pen in their hands, as soon as they're so asleep that they drop it, that's all they need. Which, one day I'll get to that level, but generally I can go a day off 4 hours sleep. I can go a day off 12 hours sleep. Do I have a morning routine? My morning routine generally is always to try and do the morning preparation from the Gurdjieff work, which is a little bit different to a meditation, and I tend to say try and remember to either say my prayers or do a contemplation, but I won't go into the specifics of that. But I mean, some people get very funny about revealing what it is, what their personal practices or personal little things that they do are. And I'm not going to reveal every single thing that I do, but I don't think it's too bad, because ultimately the results are on you. And so it's whether or not I don't think people are going to try and imitate me. So yeah, I mean that's the sleep one. Is there any chance that maybe you can have Keith Woods on your podcast? I've watched a lot of Keith Woods stuff, and I've watched a fair amount of Keith Woods, and I think he's doing good stuff. But I don't think the overlap's really there. But that's nothing against Keith Woods. I mean, there's a lot of people that I'm interested in that just at this point, Hermitix is sort of slowly finding its feet after almost 4 years of what it exactly is. So yeah, and I'm not as interested in politics these days. I've gone more towards theology and back to philosophy and things like that. So yeah, if I had $10 million, what would you do with Hermitix and or your personal work? I'd keep doing Hermitix. Some people who are newer to the podcast won't remember, but I did Hermitix for free with no payment for a year, with a tiny amount that wasn't even covering the costs for about another year or half a year, and then I only did full time, from Corona. So I've done it about even now, the amount of time on both sides. I wouldn't stop it. It's still my one love, my baby. So yeah, if I had $10 million, what would happen with my personal work? I think I'd have more time to just do bigger things, bigger projects, and at the moment I'm really into world building, and I want to do the typical male thing of start building a fantasy world just as enjoyment, and I might spend some more time doing my hobbies, but I would just I wouldn't abandon it. I'm not someone who has a huge appeal to go on holidays or go out all that much or buy a yacht or anything like that. Like, this is the thing I want to be doing, so I'm doing it. So I'm trying to live my life in a way that any huge changes to it, like a $10 million or things like that, or whatever, wouldn't change it, because it's exactly what I want to be doing. And of course not everyone can do that. I'm super lucky. Not that I earn tons and tons of money, and I'm not complaining about that either. So yeah, not much would change, to be honest. I mean, that's a very, very boring answer. I probably wouldn't even buy. I might just ask to buy the apartment that I'm renting. That'd be about it. Actually no, I'll tell you what, $10 million, what I would probably do is do like a Joe Rogan setup. So I'd have a full podcast set up like that, and maybe invite the guests to come down. That would be nice. That'd be a cool thing to do. Someone asked, what are my favourite 1v1 party games? One. Do you think I'm the kind of guy that goes to parties? I don't think so. No, I don't really go to parties. Party games. Sorry for whoever asked this question, but yeah, no. I'll do a few of these ones I've got in a text document, but I'll do a few of the ones in the chat. What do I think of McIntyre's work? I mean, I want to do some talks on After Virtue fairly soon, but my grasp on Aristotelian philosophy I don't think it's really up to scratch at the moment to do those talks. So I'm taking my time with it, and it's one of those, sort of become a canonized philosophical text. So I really want to take my time with it, especially with the Catholic thing as well. And I want to look into McIntyre's background as well, on his conversion. So there's a lot there for me to go with. And as of recent, it's been a while. I mean, with Edith Stein, I'm getting back into it, but she's actually not too hard going. It's been a while that I've spent, a lot of time with a big philosophical text, or more of a dense one. Am I still familiar with Sayed Hossein Nasser, the protege of Thriftoshan? You should still interview him while he's still with us. I'll bookmark that and look into it. Someone says they're currently reading I'm not sure how to pronounce that name. Farewell to Reason by Feyerabend. I don't know how to pronounce it, but what's my opinion on him? People have been asking me to do a question. A chat on him, and generally if I haven't come across a philosopher at all, unless I've completely forgotten, like Edouard Chouaret or a few of the other thinkers that I've tackled, that there really isn't much out there on them at all, I don't mind tackling them. But with someone such as that, where there's loads of work, I have to spend a lot of time grasping their work before I sort of jump in. I don't want to do this thing where I'm basically just relying on the guest, and it's less of a conversation and more of an interview, and I'm just poking the guest to go explain things to me. That's not what I want to do at all. So I don't really have an opinion on him as of yet. Any plans to work with Bob Dobbs again? Do you think he's really 100 years old? Hey Bob, I'm sure that's you. Yeah, much to probably the annoyance of some viewers, I actually do have plans to work with Bob again. With Bob, and I want to do it with Bob and a guy called Clinton, who is also a McLuhan scholar, I believe, or at least a specialist in McLuhan, you could say. And we're planning to do a very, very long podcast to tackle a lot of the McLuhan stuff, which, there's so much there. But it's taking a lot of reading, because outside of what I've already done with Bob with, the Electric Age, Menippean satire and things like that, you're getting into these very strange areas of McLuhan, such as the Finnegan's Wake stuff and Counter-Strike and like the Wyndham Lewis stuff and Zappa and things like this, and especially with Bob. Do I really think he's 100 years old? No, well, Yeah, I do. The guy, he's sent me proof of the fact he's streamed for 144 hours straight a few years ago. So I genuinely, he probably is 100. Someone said my voice is so soothing. Do ASMR if you ever go hungry. No. My political ideology. Well, I've always explained it like a hierarchy of not so much politics, but things where, or not a hierarchy actually, more of a foundation, and everything filters through. So Catholicism, then Gurdjieff, then Ernst Junger's concept of the anarch, and then you finally get to politics. And that for me would really be some form of monarchism, possibly even absolute monarchism. But as I say, it has to filter for all those things first. Like, those other things are in order of importance first. So, and after the anarch, it doesn't sort of make sense. But I think monarchism is generally the form of governance which ironically allows the most freedom. And if you read Hopper, Hans Hermann Hopper on this, he has some brilliant reasons as to why this is. I do want to do some talks on that book. What was my experience of doing a master's in philosophy at uni? If you recall, you did one of these. Did you meet any interesting people? My master's in philosophy was continental philosophy at Staffordshire University. What was my experience? It was a great experience. And even though sometimes Hermitix and myself come across as should we say, academia critical, I think you'd be hard pressed to find an academic who isn't academia critical. And so I don't really have a problem with, I don't have a problem with the tutors or the course or the teaching or anything like that. I do have a problem. I'm critical of the abstraction, which is academia, and what it's doing to philosophy at large, right? But you're asking me of my experience doing a master's. It was great. The tutors were both great. David Webb, who was my tutor, has been on the podcast twice to talk about the work of Michel Serres. Did I meet many interesting people? It was distant, so I was working at the time, but there was certainly interesting guests and things that came online, and yeah, it was a great course. Any thoughts on Christopher Alexander? I don't actually know who that is. Maybe I should. Have I read Peter Rollins? Any attempt on having him on your podcast? I've read Henry Rollins. I want to get Henry Rollins on. No, I haven't read Peter Rollins. Any chance in future you could schedule these live streams so they don't clash with Novara? There's a massive crossover between your audiences. You mean Novara Media? There's a crossover? Am I familiar with the work of Bonhoeffer? What is your opinion of his writing? No, I'm not. I'm sorry, I don't even know who that is. This is quite bad, isn't it? Would you be interested in doing something on animal ethics, for example, on Zoopolis? I don't know what Zoopolis is, but I would be interested in doing something on animal ethics, but I don't have the biggest grasp of it. I mean, I'm really behind the times on animal ethics, because the only book I'm aware of is Peter Singer. So I have to apologise for that one. Someone says, happy birthday. Thank you. No cap, for real, or father, if you're from the church. Do you know Poku Runyon? He has a podcast called The Hermetic Hour that has been around for like 12 years. And no, I don't know. I mean, it's almost like I just live in a bubble of my own creation, right? Like I don't really know all these things that you're referencing to. I've sort of become an old man, I think. Who would be your dream guest for the podcast at the Mo? Hi, Etsai. I have said this, and I spoke to David Scabina about it, and really it was too late. But in terms of like what I could realistically get, but at the absolute stretch, my dream guest for the podcast would genuinely be Ted Kaczynski. When I spoke to David Scabina about this, it was just before the news came out that he was in hospital, and I was thinking about writing to him and writing to the prison and saying, look, is there any chance before he dies, because it's terminal? Well, before he, at that point it was just understood that he's very old, right? But at this point I think it's completely gone. The chance of that, it's quite unfortunate, really. It would be nice to you know, hear it would be just nice to hear a discussion from him, you know, not in sort of sympathy, but just to hear it from in his own voice, I think, just before he goes, because I'm genuine, obviously I'm in clear agreement that in the next 10-20 years, Kaczynski's going to be huge. He's going to be huge. It's going to be a cultural thing, a cultural phenomenon, most definitely. Would you consider having a discussion with Jason Reza Georgiani? I think it's one of my guests actually recommended that I chat to him. I don't know his philosophy all that well, but I've come across him a couple of times. Any interest in future Muslim guests? Timothy Winter was great. There's an episode coming up that I'm going to record on a recent publication of a book called The Sun of Knowledge, which was a sort of banned Islamic mystical grimoire, and this is being released by Revelor Press, Jeremy Johnson and the people there. And so that's coming up soon. Islamic mysticism, unfortunately, it's like jumping into this for me is even though it's an Abrahamic religion, of course, it's a huge thing to suddenly learn the whole structures of something else, and even more so to then go into the details of mysticism. But one thing I'll say about the Timothy Winter, Abdul Hakim Murad episode, which was really the first step for Hermitix to go into Islamic mysticism or Islam at all, was the amount of support. I mean, of course, Murad is a big guest, and Winter is one of the, if not the one of the smartest guests, who, you know, and quickest, unfathomably smart guests that have come on the podcast. But the support and the warmth from that community was fairly astounding compared to many other episodes. So, yeah. Do I have any recommendations in analytic philosophy? Wittgenstein, and an episode I'm soon to be uploading, not releasing. It'll be releasing at the end of April. Is by a guy called Miles Hollingworth, who wrote a biography of Wittgenstein, which is one of the best philosophical, I say it's a biography, it's nothing like Ray Monk's biography, it's not a typical biography, it's philosophical work in its own right, and it's one of the best books I've read in 10 years actually, which is saying something. It was just astounding piece of writing. It's just called Ludwig Wittgenstein, but if you look at the reviews, it's sort of it's very hit and miss on the reviews. It seems that people didn't really understand what he was trying to do. But yeah, someone did. Oh no, that wasn't today. When was that? Okay, that's just subscriptions. Have I read any Frank Van Dunn? He's very similar to Hopper, but specializes in the philosophy of law. His medieval history is great, especially his defense of the church. I haven't read any Frank Van Dunn, but I'll look into him. Do I have any advice for screen-addicted people? I have a hard time unplugging and reading books. Well, one bit of advice that I would give is that a lot of the time people do this thing where they are spending too much time on screens, and they want to go, and they have this idea in their head that if they weren't on a screen, or if they weren't doing this, then all that time would 100% be spent productively, right? Like, as if this one thing stopped, then that X amount of time, let's just say, for instance, you spend 4 hours a day on a screen. Most people are spending way more, right? Let's just say you spent 4 hours a day too much on screens and you want to stop. A lot of people get into the habit of thinking that if they stopped those 4 hours on the screen, that like that, automatically those hours are going to become productive. They're not. You are going to find other distractions. The screens aren't the problem. Unfortunately, the ultimate black pill of this is you have a problem with distractions. You don't have a problem with screens. And people are giving advice: go for a walk, get a bike, leave your phone in another room. This is really just a sort of a trick in terms of distraction, of changing the distraction in some sense. And what you need to do is, I would advise, in the morning, sitting for 15 minutes with your eyes closed and just trying to keep your attention on one body part for that whole 15 minutes. And at the start, it'll be very difficult, and over time you'll find that actually that allows you to return your attention. And it's the idea of attention which is very pertinent here, because ultimately what you're doing in this, to push it out into the bigger picture, is you're simply not valuing your free time or your finite time. And it's a question of what are you trying to distract yourself from, and who is it in you who wants to be distracted. I mean, on a very practical level, yeah, you can do all these little tricks and loops and logical little things like all this, but at the end of the day, there is an underlying reason. I mean, this is like the equivalent of cognitive behavioral therapy for personal self improvement. And it's like, no, if you go to the root, it's going to be painful. But I mean, you've tried many things but failed every time. It's because I'm not talking about you specifically, but you've tried many things. It's like, well, you're trying things. What you're trying to do there is you're trying to. For instance, I mean, I'll bring in Gurdjieffian theory, but you don't have to agree with Gurdjieff at all. I'll just say the theory and go with that. What I would say is, let's think about it in terms of that, actually. Let's think about it in terms of screens and screen use, right? And distracting yourself with screen use, and how the question of why it is I keep going back to screens even though I don't want to. And actually, if you look into this, it's a complete paradox, right? Because apparently the very same person wishes to, on the one hand, not look at screens, but on the other hand, keeps looking at screens. Now, immediately you see the complete paradox here, that there's one person who doesn't want to do the thing and one person that does the thing. So these two people can't exist as the same person. That doesn't make any sense. So what you need to understand is, whatever way you want to think about it, as the fragmented personality of the same I or of different I's, that there is two voices that are contradictory in you, that are somehow existing in the same thing. And you need to start asking the questions of, why does this certain me wish to look at screens all the time, and what is it avoiding, and blah blah blah, and go into that voice and then go into the other voice as well. And from that, you'll learn more. I mean, unfortunately, if you don't go to the root, then you're gonna exhaust yourself, sort of avoiding whatever the main problem is, which probably isn't really a big thing anyway. Someone there said meditation is just staring at another screen, the inside of your head. I mean, no, but humans are meant to move. They're meant to act and to be in nature. And too much as you say, too much introspection can be pathological. But equally, it can be another distraction. And I think the current atmosphere of self-improvement for self-improvement's sake is avoidance of introspection. I mean, there's many people, and I don't really want to criticize them all that much, but for instance, one almost absurd example is Jocko Willink, right? Now, Jocko Willink is this like super tough Marine guy who's really into self-improvement, and every single morning he takes a picture of his watch at about 4:30 in the morning. But ultimately, it's like, well, what are you getting up at 4:30 in the morning for? If you're getting up just for the sake of more self-improvement without an end, you've just become this machine that's for the sake of progress, and for the progress for the sake of progress. Without an end, I mean, really, there's no point. So in terms of one thing is, who is it who wants, what is it you're distracting yourself from? Two, you stop looking at screens, you're not suddenly going to be more productive. So what is it that you're distracting yourself from? Who is it who wants to be distracted? And three, what is the end goal, right? So if the point would be is, some people want to stop looking at screens as if it's a distraction, but then they don't actually have some bigger task that they would work towards if they did stop looking at screens or distracting themselves or going on their phone or whatever it is. You need that first. the culture needs to come before the activity. So you need the thing that you're very passionate about, that before, you're like, right, now I'm not looking at screens, I'm just going to be productive. And usually you find that you probably end up doing something that's pseudo productive. So that's my advice. It's not amazing. Any comment on Russia and Ukraine? I mean, I have a lot of comments in a way. I mean, the main thing for me is just how quickly people, the Russophobia is really harrowing to witness, to be honest with you. And I mean, ultimately, there's a lot of hypocrisy from most governments. So we're going to sanction them, but we're still going to take their oil because we need it for our energy needs. But the Russophobia is fairly horrible. I mean, literally, Facebook's fine with adverts which are basically utilizing Russian people just as a scapegoat. And the absurdity of all this is fairly crazy. I mean, the idea that people think that Putin is some madman hell-bent on destruction, it's really unfortunate. And just to see how quickly people saddle up with whatever the supposed good thing is in abstract is really it's worrying, but it's not a surprise, right? But what I would say in terms of the Russian-Ukraine thing is it's another in a long line of events that will be forgotten as quickly as it was jumped on board. Can't see what the next thing is yet, but it could literally be here tomorrow, and all of a sudden we would have forgotten about the Russia-Ukraine war. So yeah. Do I see any connection between the fourth way and the writings of Simone Weil, especially in relation to attention? There's definitely a relationship there, but as you say, with the attention thing. But it's been a while, only since I did that interview on Weil's work, that I've read any. So the key difference, however, would be that the fourth way's teaching on it is done in such a way that you can personally get into yourself, whereas Weil, as I understand and from what I read, is really speaking for herself and speaking about her personal journey. So that's the big difference. Do you think that in the future there are going to be guests related to East Asian philosophy? If someone recommends me a specific thing they want me to talk about, then I'll always put the effort in and try and find someone that I can talk to about that. So if you want me to speak about East Asian philosophy in some sense, then I'm more than happy to. What's your opinion about common sense? I can't remember. I wish I could remember the quote exactly from Alfred Urage that says, the last stage of esoteric teaching is plain common sense. And that's how I feel about common sense, is to be able to look at the world objectively is usually a very simple thing, but we bung a lot in the way of being able to do it. I would love to read more, Thomas Reid Common Sense Philosophy, because in Dan Robinson's lectures on Kant, which are phenomenal, he brings Kant into relationship with Thomas Reid and the common sense philosophers. And obviously you've got the episode coming up on David Stove, who's a big fan of the common sense philosophers, and I see a lot of that in him. So maybe I'll try find someone who I could talk to about common sense philosophy. That would be pretty funny. Have I read about or heard much of Tuenis? I don't know who that is. I mean, there's been about 6 people here where I don't know who they are, so I apologize. Besides reading and writing and all other podcast-related things, what hobbies do I have? I like to build scale models. At the moment, I'm building a motorbike, a Honda CB400 scale model, and I'm building a HMS Victory scale model. It's quite fun. Other than that, blimey. I mean, the fact that I have to think about it, I ain't got that many hobbies. I mean, I'm happy to read and write most of the day. Like world building at the moment, I'm slowly getting into world building, which is very, very fun. So moving on to the questions which aren't in the chat. Someone said to me, are more of my episodes going to have a video component going forward? Basically, if the guest is okay with me recording the conversation and the video of the conversation, then every single one that I can will have them. I don't really know why I didn't do that from the start. I mean, it's a bit more awkward, and it can make it a bit more awkward for the editing if they need to go off to the loo or something happens or something like that. And with the way I do, actually, a lot of people haven't realised this, but I do edit every single episode. I don't edit things out, but the ums, the ahs, the long pauses are all edited out fairly seamlessly at times. So with the video component, I just basically can't do that because you know, because the video becomes a stuttery thing. So that's the only reason, really. But yeah, it's a bit more personable, and people seem to enjoy that. So I'll be doing that as well. Oh, the Tony's thing is, it's a German name pronounced like Goethi. Should have specified that. My bad. Yeah, I've never read any Goethi, so you know, I'll have to look into him as well. What conversations made you significantly question or even change your perspective on the discussed issue? Conversations that have changed my perspective on the issue. The David Friedman one on libertarianism, actually, libertarians don't do a good job themselves of defending their cause. Their books do a good job, but usually when they're in conversation, they don't do the best. No offense to David Friedman, it was a great chat, but after that, I just felt it didn't go as well as I didn't conduct it as well as I should have, really. That's the only one. There's a lot to think back on now. I'll have to think on that when I'm answering these other ones. What do I... sorry, what conversation... what made them change my behavior and future plans? A lot of the chats with Greer... probably changed in terms of, you know, how I'm living my life and things like that. But yeah, there hasn't been too many that have changed my plans. Blimey. No, not that I can think of, unfortunately. I mean, these questions aren't going all too well. What do I think of YB8s? I haven't read any YB8s, very sorry. I said the other day that I'm back to consuming caffeine. Why did I go back? I'm back to consuming caffeine, which I'm consuming right now at 7:30 at night. Because basically, after 2 months off caffeine, which is the point where they say, look, if you've done 2 months off caffeine, you can assess the benefits or the negatives and positives and see whether or not it's worth it either way. And you sleep so much without caffeine. It's quite astounding how much the human body sleeps without this. And to be honest, in a certain sense, I mean, for instance, when you go to sleep and you go outside and you go camping or you go in a cabin in the woods, you sleep naturally and you feel like you sleep how a human should sleep. And you get these brilliant nights' sleep that are very high quality, and you only need 5 or 6 hours, right? But I feel like caffeine's needed in a modern world where you're just always sleeping unnaturally, right? Like blackout curtains and eye masks. Not that I have an eye mask, and then the super comfy beds and you know, things like this. It's like you need caffeine in a world that is constantly you know, artificial. You need artificial stimulants in an artificial world, basically. So I had to go back and very much enjoy it. Am I still working as a carpenter? If so, how does it compare to past jobs you've had? No, I'm not still working as a carpenter. I lost that job because of Corona, and that's why I'm now doing this. It was a very enjoyable job. It's a very calm job in a way, and I really enjoyed it because it was good company. The kind of people that are in that work are very salt of the earth, and you sort of just given your tasks and you get on with them, and you don't have people over your shoulder, and you don't have customers, and you don't have admin, and you know, it makes it lovely. But unfortunately, carpentry isn't as idyllic as people would like to think it is. I mean, there's not many carpenters out there who are sort of carving and hand sawing. It's a lot of machines and things, but it's still a very nice job in a way. Am I familiar with system theory, perhaps even Luhmann or Luhmann's version of it specifically? Möller wrote some books on it. I've heard of systems theory and that kind of thing. I sort of moved away from that cybernetic and systems theory and game theory way of looking at the world. I just think it tries to pigeonhole everything into some form of algorithmic equation for the human mind, and a lot of the time, in broad strokes, yeah, it's generally right. But you speak to the average person, you realise there's no such thing as the average person, right? But I'd do an episode on it. What occult path or book would you suggest to a man who is fighting bad habits, addictions? It's not a cult, but bad habits or addictions. Blimey. I would recommend In Search of the Miraculous by Peter Uspensky, which isn't a cult as far as I'm concerned. But I would also suggest Bad Habits. Yeah, In Search of the Miraculous by Peter Uspensky, and I would also recommend chatting to your friends about it. Thank you for introducing me. That's no worries. Thank you. Would you consider doing an episode on classical music? Someone like Bach or Scriabin? Yeah, I would. I would consider it, but and I've considered episodes on film, but episodes on art. I imagine music would be as well, and things along those lines. It's and literature even very difficult to talk about compared to theory. It's yeah. So I would happily do one on classical music, but I think I'd have to find someone who's very very theoretical about it. Yeah. Your talks with Greer are great, but his views on Christianity seem very Protestant. Do you not push back out of respect, or is it just a policy on the podcast? A lot of people have commented this and even spoken to me about this before. Have said, why do I not push back against guests? And I just think it's completely pointless and fruitless to maybe not. Maybe that's wrong. I have seen so much good potential discussion go to waste because of a personal gripe, which then strings out across the whole conversation, and you get a bad atmosphere, you get a bad air about things, and then all of a sudden it's no longer a discussion, but it even can turn into a grilling, an argument, or a debate. And that's just the worst way to handle anything. It's the worst way to handle a podcast. Yeah, but as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I released the 1 hour podcast transparent course for £25, very cheap, for this purpose, to teach people what it is that makes a good discussion in terms of podcasting interviews. And no one cares about the host. The topic is key. The topic is the main thing. The content is the main thing. And all the rest is a load of nonsense. And so to invite a guest on, which a lot of podcast hosts do, to then basically jump up on their own soapbox and be like, here's what I think and here's why you're wrong. Really what you're doing is just making someone uncomfortable who's volunteered their time. And if they've come on and they've written a book, they're a wealth of knowledge. Whether or not you agree or disagree with that knowledge isn't the point. It's about asking questions which probe open the conversation, which allow them to naturally and organically talk about the discussion or the topic at hand, and then you can decide for yourself whether or not you agree or disagree with them. There's very rare few instances where I think that it's actually going to be a good choice to push back against a guest, because at the end of the day, the best thing you can do as a host is make them feel welcome and comfortable and feel like they actually want to talk about the work. Otherwise, I find it, to be honest, a bit rude to invite guests on and do that. But and it's why, some people have said, have you ever thought about like sort of soliciting a debate? And I have no interest in debates. Debates don't do anything. I mean, people go to debates from their sides, right? So as soon as a debate starts, it's already a clash and an argument. And you're very rarely going to get people who are mature enough to open up and say and admit, even at the end, that they were wrong or they've changed their views on something, because they're going there on a defense. And it's one of the great problems in philosophy, really, I think, in academic philosophy, is the idea of defending something and moving away from discussion and moving away. The idea of a conference is very aggressive. We're going to have a conference about this. People have got to defend your thesis, and it's like from an attack. I don't think that's a very good way to go about philosophy. But unfortunately, you need some form of value system to be able to have this form of credentialism, I guess. Someone said, "Am I a teacher of philosophy?" I'm not like accredited or anything, but I've done talks on Kant, on the Critique of Pure Reason. I've done talks on other books. If people wanted me to teach a book, then I'd spend time with it. But because I have sort of a maximalist, completionist mindset, I end up just reading. Like for the Kant chat, I read like 2 biographies and about 4 secondary works on it, and listened to a load of lectures. It took me so long. Someone says, so what I'm saying is Druidry is better than Christianity. Well, I'm not. Unfortunately, I'm not the best Christian, because I'm not here to do missionary work. I don't really think that's how it works. Yeah. People are drawn culturally to what they're culturally drawn to. Is my own thing. Maybe I'll change in time with that. And I think Christianity has a place for everyone. Absolutely. Yeah. Where's a good place to start with Schopenhauer? There's a Penguin edition called, I think it's just called Essays. I think Essays and Aphorisms is brilliant. Really good place to start, just to get a feel for Schopenhauer, and then ultimately after that, read the Fourfold Root of Sufficient Reason. But actually, you could probably read a synopsis of that on Wikipedia. It does a fairly good job because it's a pretty straightforward book, and then move into The World of Will and Representation. But in my opinion, I mean, even though that's a fantastic, it really an extension of Kantian thought, and it's doing its own thing from Kantian thought, right? I think a lull. Sorry, someone said a lull there. I think Schopenhauer is best when he's at his spiciest, right? When he's a fantastic aphorist. And if you read the biography by, I can't remember, he has Zalowski, you realize that Schopenhauer is this very bombastic, witty person, and so he comes through best when he's almost Nietzschean, and when he's just firing out aphorisms in that way. So yeah, that's where I'd start. Happy birthday, James. Hope you have a good one, and thanks for the podcast. I just picked up Violence by Lull because of the podcast. Thanks very much. Yeah, I'm really enjoying reading Presence in the Modern World by Lull. It's answered a lot of questions. I think he's so fantastically clear and straightforward, which is really surprising because he's French. It's a rarity, and he comes across almost like a C.S. Lewis type figure, which is great. Who are your favorite interviewers by interview skill style alone? I've said this to people before, and it's a super cliche thing to say, but whether you agree or disagree with his own personal politics, which are clearly quite liberal, maybe, I think Louis Theroux is the master of interviewing. I mean, he's gone into every single type of absolute extreme atmosphere and managed to come away with some of the most personal, answers to his questions that one could get. He's going to, as I say, extremely volatile atmospheres and somehow doing it. I think Theroux's great at that. I don't mind Joe Rogan. I mean, Joe Rogan's fine. I mean, people get on at Joe Rogan for like allowing things, but he's doing really, I sort of learnt a bit from Joe Rogan in the sense of invite the guest on and just allow them to speak about their topic. So for instance, people get on at him because he's like inviting these people on who are vax critical, but unfortunately if he invites someone on who's, say, critical of the vaccine and he just pushes them against it, you haven't learned anything. You're just going to have this dramatic thing when nothing happens. So, and I think he's had from both sides, and I think it's a fairly, he's fairly good. Other than that, no, I don't know too many others. I'll have to think about that. Have I ever considered talking with Vincent Garton about his work? I've got his stuff bookmarked actually to talk about. Someone asked to talk about like accelerationism and Catholicism, which I think would really overlap with like horror for Garton as well. So I'll have to message him soon and see if he wants to come on. I think he's probably working on. So I think he's working on a PhD. Funniest philosophy text I've ever read. I've recently read about a quarter, and I don't really merge all that well with him. But Max Stirner, the translation by Wolfie Landstreicher, I think that's his name, is hilarious. I mean, Stirner is really, really funny. At times, I would even say Emil Chiron is funny, just when it gets to the extreme of nihilism. Michel Serre at points is very, very funny, especially when he's talking about, telling Socrates to just shut the hell up. That was just like, shut up, Socrates, which is always really, really funny. And I think there's a huge place for humour in philosophy, but not of that Zizek type where it's like self-knowing humour. I just want, I want people who are just dunking on other philosophers hard. David Stove, of course, I was reading some last night in, I thought I had it here. I think I left it somewhere else. Yeah, I have. Cricket versus Republicanism. I mean, I was just going through that, and it's so funny. Is there any way to integrate Nietzschean views as spiritual philosophy? Well, yeah, I mean, it's easy. Nietzsche is a Christian. Um, Nietzsche and spiritual views. Come on. Nietzsche is a Christ, Ian, right? So, like, I just, it's just the saddest case of, like, I wish he just made the leap, because that's what he needed. And he did. I don't think his philosophy was really a success in any sense. And all the people that are self-proclaimed Nietzscheans, it just ends up into this sort of hedonistic thing again. I think you could tack on a spirituality, but without some form of transcendent Godhead. If you want to talk about it, then maybe. Robert Anton Wilson. How about Robert Anton Wilson? I really like Prometheus Rising was a game changer for me. That was a real opening to a lot of spiritual stuff very early on, and I also think that the Illuminatus trilogy is really, really funny. He's really funny, but there was a lot of nefarious stuff that came from Robert Anton Wilson, and that era of like chaos magic and things like that were a bit sketchy at times. But yeah, he's Anton Wilson's all right. I haven't spent outside of that. There was quantum psychology that I wanted to read as well. It's on my list. Someone said my grandfather once described me as somewhere to the right of Genghis Khan. Is this still accurate when it comes to my politics? That was always a running joke to make everyone in the room feel really uncomfortable when I arrived, which he seemed to love. No, not necessarily. I don't try. It's just pointless to concern yourself with politics, right? Like, I don't even know who Duncan Trussell is, but he has that fantastic quote of like, somewhere there's some guy sat by a waterfall enjoying life, not knowing, how angry he should be at something, right? Because he hasn't got a smartphone, and that's sort of how I feel about politics. Is like, and people get up in arms about this because they're like, well, you're in some privileged position. People, you can't do anything. You can't do anything, and to get up in arms about something that, or get angry or about something that you can't do anything about is really silly. And to go off the Gurdjieffian current, I mean, Peter Uspensky, when he's at his absolute most prodding the wound of people who are a bit whiny, he says all negative emotion is indulgence. All negative emotion, right? But it's my favorite Gurdjieff quote, and the one I learnt the most from is when Gurdjieff and Uspensky are talking about war. It's very apt actually at the moment when Gurdjieff says everything happens, no one does anything, because his whole thing was that people can't do anything, that you have to learn and earn free will. I tend to look at that more metaphorically these days, but that idea and just to not get too indulged in the idea that you could somehow save all this, and just to bring it back to love thy neighbor in terms of your immediate environment. It's far more helpful than having this sort of abstract uproar about something that you haven't even seen firsthand. And thanks to the absolute entanglement of communication networks, you'll never be able to get to, it's like you're immediately just given a knot of information to sort out, and you can't really do anything with it. So to get up in arms and about that just seems a bit false, really. FN was obsessed with Christianity in a way. FN, was there someone called FN? I don't know. Favorite New Testament book that's not one of the four Gospels? There's the letter of James. It's really short, but it's so good. And I'd almost say to people, if you just want like I think it's like 4 pages. Let me see if I can find it. I've obviously got my Bible on hand. Where is it? But yeah, the letter of James is I probably won't be able to find it. I think it's right near the end. No, I'm not going to be able to find it right now, so sorry about that. But yeah, look it up, I guess. Favorite ecological thinker? Edward Abbey is fantastic. in mixing that sort of practical stuff in the Monkey Wrench Gang with Desert Solitaire, which is really, really good. Linklater, of course, fantastic. I guess I like people who aren't looking at ecology too abstractly and tend to base their philosophy on something very localized, because I think that's the only way that ecology can work. I mean, I don't think that you can have the globalized form that we have and a sound ecology. It's just you've got to sacrifice something. And people don't want to do that. Oh, Friedrich Nietzsche. Okay, FN for me will always mean fanged Noumena. And yeah, Nietzsche was obsessed with Christianity in a way, and he was obsessed with Christ, right? So the death of God really translates as the death of Christendom. The death of an objective value system, which allows you to have a way to coordinate morals and ethics throughout society. And once that's gone, well, as Dostoevsky says, once there is no God, or is it? Yeah, Dostoevsky. Once there is no God, everything is permissible, which is basically what is being repeated by Nietzsche with the death of God. And he was obsessed, but he was obsessed with Christ. He I believe I'm right in thinking that there was only two people he ever considered as examples of the Übermensch, and it was Caesar and Christ, but Caesar was for him too egotistical and too sort of human. And quite ironically, Caesar is one of the people that C.S. Lewis puts at the furthest reaches of hell in The Great Divorce, right? But he was a Christian. He saw something in the Christ figure to admire, to use in a way. I mean, it's obviously a disagreeable thing for many Christians to see his reading of it. But I think it's interesting. There was a time when I tried to think about Nietzsche in terms of Gurdjieffian theory. Gurdjieff splits everything into body, intellect, and emotions, and then when those three become harmonious, work together, you get the fourth sort of a conscious man. And if they're out of balance, that's where the problems lie. And I remember thinking, what was it for Nietzsche that was out of balance? Because he had a relationship with the body, with his constant illnesses, which he overcame, and his headaches and vomiting and sickness, and his ascetic principles as well, and his walking. He had a relationship with the body, and he clearly had a severe intellect, and he clearly was a very emotional man as well. And I think at the end of the day, his emotions were so volatile and so big that they outgrew, it was just so much for him, and eventually just sort of collapses. What books on Elul have I read so far? So I've read the Technological Society, We Live in a Society, and Presence in the Modern World, and then there's a few secondary, the ones that I got from Jake Rollison when I did those chats. And I mean, Elul, once again, French philosophy. These guys are like, right, I'm just going to write another 4 books this week. He wrote something like 40 books, and there's probably, and I mean, I don't envy scholars of these people. I mean, Sayre wrote like almost 60, you're just constantly writing, and none of it's that bad as well. So, it's all very interesting. Someone did say, do I think Gurdjieff probably made up parts of his biography? Possibly. I think, possibly. I mean, Paul Beekman's Taylor's biography is very critical of this, and he finds a lot there that is up for question. Plato, particularly in the Republic, is the ultimate Gurdjieffian thinker. I mean, maybe. So just keep asking the questions, and I'll keep going, because I think this was all the ones that I had from the Discord. And yeah, if anyone has any more that maybe are a bit more in depth, I can go into. Wrote almost 70. Wow. And someone says, happy birthday. Thank you very much, Lawrence. Oh, and while I'm here, I should probably, I'm dreadful at marketing, and I don't care about it, but while I'm here, I will promote my latest little book, which is looking really good there on camera, I must admit. Be Not Afraid, which is £10 or $10. It is about 150 pages long, and it's a fictionalized conversion story of a nihilist turned Christian. So if you want a very short, enjoyable read, which in its own way is an introduction to a very light entry-level Christian mysticism and how to think about the world, I think in that conversion process from relativism to objective meaning, then you'll enjoy it. Is the book autobiographical? I don't think anyone can write something that doesn't have elements of biography in it. And ultimately, this is fictionalized autobiographical. Yeah, I did work in a bakery for a while, but it wasn't this dreadful. And it wasn't in the basement; it was upstairs. But I combined some things. It's autobiographical in a way, but I've tried to make it in the sense that it could apply. Really, this is a book for young men and women of the West who are feeling the same way, who have this, who are maybe going through this process and need a little nudge of how to just make things work and suddenly see them. And if it helps one person just feel a bit closer or go over to Christianity, then it's done its job. Favorite Tolkien character. Now we're getting to the good stuff. Right. I mean, of course, because I'm really into Tolkien at the moment. I've been reading it and I rewatched the director's cut because it was my birthday, and it's what I do on my birthday. And since I've been reading it, I think they're two different things. They really are two different things. And the films are more hopeful, and Hollywood needed to do that. But Boromir in the books, and he's done well in the film. I think he's one of the characters that has done the best actually in the films as well. Is ultimately one of the most Christian characters in the whole thing, right? He just wants to do his people right, but his pride and his fall really come from the fact that he has seen what can happen. He has seen the work of the ring. He's seen his people fall, and he's up there as one of my favorite characters. But I would have to say that my favorite character, unfortunate for people who've only seen the films, is Tom Bombadil, because Tom Bombadil is something as an abstract symbol that we need more of in the modern world, right? This sort of mystical anomaly, which in Ralph Wood's book, or The Gospel According to Tolkien, which is talking about the Christian symbolism, he understands Tom Bombadil as like an anomaly inserted by Tolkien to basically say that outside of Bombadil, right, you have the Valar, and you have Gandalf as basically these angels, and the elves as angels, and you can really form the Christian logic around the whole thing, right? But Bombadil, Woods sort of argues that he's been added in as this, like, you'll never fully understand the world and God's plan. And Bombadil, what I like about him is he basically just says, look, I've outlined this area, this local area of life, and in this I'm a kingdom, right? He is the true anarch. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of other characters. I mean, they are all such great characters, and I'm a sort of a sucker, I guess, for what they now consider very patriarchal and old school values, such as, heroism and courage, and the Christian virtues of hope. But they're all great, and I mean, Sam, of course, is a fantastic character, and the emotions that Tolkien gave him are really beautiful. Yeah. So yeah. But it probably would be Boromir or Bombadil. Did I read Narnia as a kid? I didn't really read that much as a kid. I didn't even have really books. I couldn't go back and say these were my childhood reading. I started reading seriously at about 16, thanks to an English teacher who was like actually good at his job, and we were learning Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men, and we sort of finished it, and he said, well, anyone who's interested, the Grapes of Wrath is far better by Steinbeck. And I remember thinking, wait, an English teacher is actually interested in the books? Like, he actually had an opinion on it? And I went and read Grapes of Wrath, and I had to agree, it was better. But then he sort of said, look, here's some books that are better than basically what they were teaching, which wasn't great, but unfortunately that was the syllabus. I've talked before about dabbling in the occult and encountering some sort of evil presence that spooked you. Is it something you could talk about? Man, this question comes up every time. The thing is, like, it's unless you're doing real serious stuff, like the Abram Malin or something like that, you're not going to have demons jumping up in front of you. Unless you're practicing goetic magic or something like that. you're not. You really described it there. It's an evil presence. It's an intuition that something's not right, and you're ultimately, if you ask for something, you have to pay it back, and you need to remember that. And with Christ and with religion and with Abrahamic religions, when you pray, when you ask for something, and when you just pray generally, you're not just given it and then have to pay it back in the form of chance. You are given the strength to undertake it within God's will. Or if you open yourself well enough, you are to understand why it is that you aren't to get that thing. And if you're introspective enough in terms of that place within God's will, then you will understand why that wouldn't be for you. And often a lot of this comes in retrospect. You look back and you realize that everything fell into place because of these certain things. One thing that, I mean, for those that that enjoyed more of the quote unquote occult stuff on the podcast, soon after I've finished The Presence in the Modern World, I'm going to be beginning 22. Well, it'd be 23 because I'll do an introduction. 23 talks on meditations on the tarot, which is a journey into Christian Hermeticism, or an introduction into Christian Hermeticism via readings and analysis of the major arcana. And the surprising thing about this book is that one of the editions, though not this edition, actually has a afterword, I believe, by Hans von Balthasar, who is one of the most well-known Catholic theologians. So that's going to be really interesting. Half of them will be for patrons and half for free. So yeah, there'll be a lot of content from them. Did I take the Rudolf Steiner pill yet? I read Gary Lachman's book on Steiner, and I read a couple of other little bits and for that Weber Steiner episode. And someone recommended Dale Brunsvold, and we're just in discussion about how we're going to go about it, because he's literally been reading and teaching Steiner for like 40 years. So I almost want to like reel him in and be like, can we just talk about every single Steiner text, because it'll give me a lot to do. And also me and Aaron, who did the Weber Steiner episode, we're going to be talking about Steiner's Christology. So he has commentaries on all the Gospels, and he has his own ideas around them. So we're going to be talking about Steiner's Christology as well. Someone said they always wanted to read the Meditations on the Tarot. So many of the listeners recommended an episode on Meditations on the Tarot, and that's why I want to do do all of it. And I almost want to do the full thing, and then maybe set up some form of discussion group where we can chat about it. Someone said, what's in the new book? It's just about accepting Christianity, right? It's not really it's a Christian book, of course. You can guess by the little cross. It's a Christian book, but prayers, there's one prayer in it. There's not all that much mention of God explicitly until maybe the last third. It's about it's about a step of conversion, which I think is criminally and critically under-articulated, which is a lot of conversion books. I'm thinking most famously of Home Sweet Rome by Scott Hahn, and even C.S. Lewis's what's it called? Ode to Joy, I think it is still sort of steeped, and it sort of begins where God begins, and that's not the tough bit. That's not the difficult part of conversion process. And so this book was sought to somehow bridge that impossible language gap of the process where you're, for anyone who's sort of an ex-nihilist or ex-relativist or ex-atheist, to look back, you're like, wow, my 15-year-old self would be up in arms about me even going to church, let alone writing a 150-page fictional book about the experience in a positive light. So being able to articulate that of how it is one got to the other, I think firstly is important for saying to atheists, look, here's the internal experience, because this is what that whole book is really an an allegorical discussion of what's going on internally as you convert. Not convert in the signing the forms and going to church sense of the physical doing the step sense of what is the internal conversion that's happening, and that thing is the hardest bit to explain, and it's the hardest bit to really discuss with anyone, and that's why I thought it was so important to write about. If I have kids, will I send them to Steiner schools? I mean, I don't know too much about. I know Steiner was very famous for his educational stuff and theories, but I don't know all that much about Steiner schools. I'd either do that, or it would either be one of those sorts of Montessori school or Steiner school, or homeschooled. I wouldn't want to send them to major education because. You know why. Someone just supported me, so thanks very much. The YouTube support is great, and it's very, very much appreciated. So that's Roscoe Pico Train. Thanks very much. So the book is on Amazon, things like that, of course. What else have we got planned? There is going to be obviously the Edith Stein, the problem of empathy talks, but for that I have to read through some Husserl, and Husserl is horrendous to read, so there you go. And there's also some other shorter books that I want to do talks on. One is Joseph Piper's The Leisure, The Basis of Culture, and one is a book which inspired Kaczynski, which is sort of underappreciated, and I spoke about with Sean Fleming, which is the Human Zoo by Desmond Morris, which is basically a zoologist looking at civilization from the perspective of a zoologist and seeing why it is we do what we do and how we act. Someone said, excited to see you cover meditation on the tarot. Thanks very much. That was Holly. Thanks very much, Holly. Does being a Cath change your relationship with JMD? No, not at all. Not at all. It won't change my relationship with anyone. I'm not, as I said, it's not. I'm not moving into that sort of missionary. Oh, you're now wrong, right? Like, no, I'm still super, super interested in all the other ways of seeing things. This is the one that I believe is the truth and works for me. But to suddenly say that people who've spent 40, 60 years in their personal spiritual pursuit, which has turned them into maybe a better person, a more wholesome person, a more harmonious person who's giving and generous and charitable and friendly and warm in their community and a good husband or etc., then go, no, you're wrong and that was all stupid. I mean, that's ridiculous. So no. Do I like cats? Ever owned or want to own a pet? I'm not massive on cats. Cats are very selfish and they have agendas and they weird me out because they are mystical creatures who are hell-bent on something. And they, as I understand it, they domesticated themselves because they understood that it was a good deal. Whereas dogs were like, we domesticated them and now they just love it. Have I ever owned one? No, I've lived with dogs. I've lived with spaniels before, and that's fantastic. They're such lovely animals. Do I want to own one? I'd love to own a dog. I'd love to. I can't have one here, unfortunately. I'd love to own I'd love to own a dog, or have a dog as a pet, or maybe even a bird. A little bird would be brilliant. What do I think is the cardinal difference between the phenomenology of a theist and an atheist? And I mean, this is an extremely important and fascinating philosophical question. If you go read Converts to the Real by Edward Baring, who I did a chat with, you see that when phenomenology comes onto the scene, the exact same Husserlian phenomenology in philosophy basically sends loads of people more towards atheism, and loads of people going, actually no, this proves all the stuff we were saying about Catholicism all along. What do I think the cardinal difference is between them? Blimey. I mean, that is a really difficult question. That's a truly difficult question. And I can't answer it. I think what you'd have to do is I would say you'd read someone like Stein in conversation with someone like Heidegger and see what's happening there. I would actually say that there's a lot of biographical stuff happening there. I'm a very biographical thinker when it comes to philosophers, and I've just begun to sort of really dislike Heidegger. So, yeah. Do I think distributism is still a feasible answer to the social question? I don't. I've got a copy of The Servile State by Hilaire Belloc to read and possibly do a chat on. But I don't know all that much about distributism yet. It's like one of the very Catholic things I need to know, I guess. What do I think of Jay Dyer? I just haven't spent that much time with Jay Dyer. People go on about him. He seems like he knows his stuff when it comes to Orthodox theology. But yeah. Oh, how does it feel to be a Pisces in the end of the age of Pisces? I don't know. What's it like to be a Pisces. I'm doing a chat about astrology soon with JMG, my main man. Can't wait. Was Gurdjieff an authentic spiritualist or just a rascal? Much like French philosophers, most mystical or spiritual thinkers are one part authentic, one part plagiarist, and one part bullshit artist or charlatan. And yeah, that's what you need to know. He was both. He was an authentic spiritualist. He was a rascal, the rascal saint, as he's called, and he was a charlatan at times. But he openly admits. People go, Gurdjieff painted birds a bright color and sold them to people, and he's a complete con artist. Gurdjieff put that in his own biography in Meetings with Remarkable Men. So I mean, I don't understand what people are getting at. He was a. I mean, a lot of spiritualism is about stripping back to the absurdity of things, to the very to a clarity which is almost seemingly too simple. Alan Watts, though, just to connect the two, Alan Watts' theory on Gurdjieff, especially with the book that many of us in the groups have been reading now for over a year, The Great Tomb, Beelzebub's Tales of His Grandson, the 1,200-page great mystical magnum opus of the man himself. Alan Watts basically said, you do realize that the point of Gurdjieff is to push you to such a limit that you realize it's all nonsense, and that internal feeling allows you to be freed up for more spiritual growth. And I still like the theory, but I don't agree with it. You ever overwhelmed by all the knowledge that exists? No, sometimes, but no, because you slowly begin to simplify and enjoy the little things. I was talking to someone about this the other day about that midwit meme where it goes up, down the middle, and if you actually put age on that, as in the human age, it makes complete sense, right? Children over here, children are interested in the very simple things. Ooh, a cake. Ooh, that's enjoyable. Ooh, a nice game of football. And as you age, you get to about 15, 16. Oh, it needs to be a bit more complicated. It needs to be complicated. And then you get to the peak midwit bit at about mid-30s, especially for an academic. Everything has to be the most complicated thing in the world. And then what? Then what happens? You get to about 50. Oh, okay, it's actually simpler again. You're having the David Stove moment or the David Hume moment. Then you get to about 60, you no longer care. You want to retire, you want to go back to just eating cake and sitting by a river. 70, what do those people care about? They care about playing with their grandkids and just doing nice things, right? The purpose of life is to be able to probably keep that line as low as possible and still have that complexity and understanding, but understanding all the small things that they're beautiful. So there you go. That's my little midwit meme for you. How much do I bench? Now we're talking. How much do I bench? I'll give you my totals for when I was at my peak. I couldn't tell you now because I basically just do home workouts at the moment because gyms around here were getting too expensive and it just wasn't worth my time. But I could deadlift 160 kg. I could bench 110. And I could squat 100, and I could overhead press 65. Not amazing. I was about 75 kilos at the time. There you go. Do you think classical, authentic astrology is congruent with Christianity? it's very difficult because the idea of a classical or authentic astrology, and like if you're talking Hellenistic or it's congruent with Christianity. I mean, there is stuff in Christianity. I mean, for instance, when Jesus is born, a star comes from the east. I mean, astrologers have looked into this, and then there's an orthodox theory about this which says that, I've got it in my notes regarding I can't remember, unfortunately. The Star of Divine Grace. So yeah, and it's a prophecy in Numbers, like 23:47, I think, or something like that. Yeah. So it's whether or not it's congruent is difficult to say. How's the Tales reading group going? There's 2 Beelzebub's Tales. There's 2 Beelzebub's Tales reading groups, one on Tuesdays and one on Sundays. The one on Tuesdays has now been running almost 50 weeks, and it's an 82-week reading group, and the other one is on about week 30 something, and they're going really well. Yeah. Is there anywhere overseas you'd love to visit? Bonus, if there's philosophical, theological motivation. Yeah, I mean, the main places I'd ever want to visit are just because of philosophical or theological motivation. I don't have an opinion on... I don't have an appeal to just go on a holiday. You know, like, I don't need a break. I don't want a break. You know, it's just for people who are boring. I mean, what do you need a break from? I've got stuff to do. I've got stuff to write, stuff to build, you know, conversations to have. But yes, so one, I'd love to just, I mean, unfortunately you can't visit there because I think the owners really hate Gurdjieff. But the priory where Gurdjieff, you know, was teaching in La Fontainebleau for however many years, would be beautiful just to see it, and just to be able to see Gurdjieff's grave if you can, and see the plaque of Catherine Hulme, who passed away there, and also maybe visit the Gurdjieff's flat while I was there, and that would be nice. I also want to visit Ernst Junger's house, which is open to the public like 1 or 2 days a week, and it's got all his stuff in. It's a beautiful manor in the heart of the German countryside. There's probably, you know, a few more that I'd have to think on. Where to start with astrology? You know, I've never fully got my head around astrology, and every time I find a book which is like, here's how to start with astrology, the first 20 pages are fine, and then they're just like, and here's 50 houses and 50 different symbols that you need to memorize. And I've bought a very old set. It's one of my most treasured book possessions. A full set of Alan Leo's. So that's the best place that I've found, is Alan Leo's astrological works from like 1911. And you probably find scan-ins. They're probably on archive.org, but they're very straightforward and very simple. But unfortunately, astrology doesn't seem to have a very simple starting point. Really, if you understand what it is in general, then you just have to get going with like memorizing the symbols, the houses, the signs, and all that stuff. Yeah, but you know, yeah. Other than that, I can't really give you many advice. Oh, someone asked a good question. Here we go. Is Heidegger and concomitant works overrated? Let's just forget that middle bit. Is Heidegger overrated? Yeah, he is. He's overrated, but also he basically did one of the single most damaging philosophical blows to God imaginable, because he doesn't... Nietzsche says God is dead. You think that is the most... But it's like, no, God dying, unfortunately, is already within Christianity. Like, yeah, God did die, and then he rose from the dead. I mean, that's the whole point, is the resurrection is the major point, right? But Heidegger keeps God, but immanentizes him as this sort of flesh-like symbol within his philosophy, and then destroys that symbol. And it's really harrowing to watch him do this from his bitter position where he didn't become a priest. So I'd see Heidegger on the way out, to be honest. I don't know where he all fits in. Why do I think Christianity is in decline? That's no surprise, really. I mean, Christianity's... Maybe this is heretical to say. hasn't Christianity always been in decline in a way? Like, this is the kingdom of the devil. This world is the kingdom of the devil. So everything in this world is always going to be trying to push Christianity down. But I get what you mean. I mean, it's been in decline since in modern times, it's been in decline since the 60s, right? The sexual revolution. But before that, you have the industrial revolution and the Enlightenment, and you just keep having these things then you have the Reformation, and basically it's been this sort of cyclic thing where each cycle gives you something else which decreases it. But I think now we're actually on the way back up for a little bit. Yeah. Do I like/read classic literature? If so, have you read Marcel Proust's magnum opus In Search of Lost Time, Remembrance of Things Past? I have a huge list of classic literature that I want to get through, and I have Proust to read because Girard draws on Proust. Is it Proust, Flaubert, and a couple of others, and I can't remember. But yeah, but there's this sort of canonized list that I'd love to slowly get through in my lifetime, but I haven't spent much time with Proust, no, unfortunately. Didn't Kant do that to God too? Yeah, Kant did do that to God, and the people who say that, Kant in his biography, he's this like, someone will have to remember the denomination that he is of Protestantism, but it's like it came across as the most utilitarian, dull, sacrament and divine mysticism stripped strain of Protestantism, which is, and Kant does this whole thing where he's like, which itself is very damaging with his ethics, right? And Kant, he's still using the language of the Catholic Church, the idea of duty for he basically is trying to say, right, well, let's remove God from the equation, then try work out morals, and then if that works, then we put God back in and it all makes sense. He's just an atheist, and he also did do damage, yeah. From my perspective as a Zoomer who was irreligious, I think it's because Christianity completely failed to teach its message. Christianity is very reluctant to modernize itself, and I guess what we could say, especially with Protestantism, is that in its attempt to modernize itself, the modernization has overtaken. Now, I'll explain this with Lullian terms, in this is coming up in the next talk for subs and patrons, is that Ellul talks about ends and means, the means justify the ends, and he's saying that we no longer have ends anymore, we just do not have ends, we only have means. So technique is basically efficiency, productivity, things have to be better, faster, stronger, etc., right? That's all we have is more means, and the only successful means is just the means that is successful. And I would say that modern Christianity no longer has the ends. It doesn't focus on the kingdom of God is within you, which so the reason to act as a Christian is you always act in relation to the end, which is the end times, the end days, the eschaton, which is coming, but you understand that end in relation to every single present act. So your means now are quite literally the same end in each act. So you act now, your means justify your ends, which in themselves is the eternal now of God, right? Modern Christianity doesn't have that. It doesn't seem to really focus on that. It's all means. So it just keeps sort of going along without... Modern Christianity, I mean, it doesn't teach the message. And this is where the big misconceptions about Christ is like, Christ is just this nice dude, Christ wouldn't... That's not very Christian of you. Okay, whatever. Have I heard anything about the CCRU? I've done a course on the CCRU. If you are interested, if you type in Hermitix CCRU in Google, you'll find I did a course on the CCRU. If you're interested, thoughts on Eastern philosophy/religion. I mean, that's such a huge question. I haven't spent much time with Eastern philosophy, and I haven't spent much time with Eastern philosophy. Now, Eastern religion, Buddhism, interesting, but the works that we get as Westerners for Eastern religion are usually from Western thinkers. So Alan Watts, great, but I always think like this is all a bit understood from our Western perspective, And I remember Abdul Hakim Murad in our chat is basically saying, with with Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, the Abrahamic religions, that Abrahamic foundation is very easy for a Westerner to merge with, to mold with. Eastern religions not so, and I think there is just this cultural void that I'm just never going to get, unfortunately. Yeah. Have I read Christ the Eternal Tao? Maybe we get an episode or lecture on it. Heard amazing things about this book, so it's on my list. What do you think about the Gnostic ideas about the Pleroma, Sophia, and the Old Testament God as a false god? I don't know them all that well. There is, of course, elements of Gnosticism that interest me. And in Charon's book, Tears and Saints, he draws on Gnosticism in a certain sense. And I think Gnosticism has to be understood seriously. You can't just and to be honest, the Gnostic Gospels are very interesting. There's still wisdom in these texts. In the Catholic Catechism, it says that there are rays of light, as in rays of truth, in many other paths, but the complete truth is in the Catholic Church. So just the idea of right, I'm a Christian now, disregard it all is very, very silly, and you'd be hard pressed to find anyone serious who would do that. What's your take on the human paradigm? You'd have to explain what you mean by human paradigm. Unfortunately, a couple of people saying happy birthday. Thank you. It's not exactly today because, but it was 1 week ago, and I got 2 presents. I got a kidney stone and a car crash. So thank you very much. But thank you very much. Any thoughts on Marshall McLuhan and his works? Is he worth reading in today's world? Yeah, absolutely worth reading. And genuinely, authentically, I mean that the best person to learn Marshall McLuhan from is Bob Dobbs. If you want to truly intuitively learn Marshall McLuhan, Bob Dobbs is your man. Definitely worth reading today. I would recommend starting with something actually called Counterblast, which is very short, punchy work, really fun, and the way it's formed really gets into you quite quickly. After that, of course, you could tackle understanding media or some of the more dry text. But McLuhan's quite fun to read, and he draws on things in such a peculiar way. Someone said, I heard before you got your bachelor's in art. Can you share some of your favourite contemporary modern artists as well as your favourite pre-modern artists? My favourite modern or contemporary artists are Gerhard Richter, Yves Klein, Anselm Kiefer, Barnett Newman, Mondrian, Clifford Still. Around them. Pre-modern, I was never huge. I mean, I don't know if Egon Schiele wouldn't be pre-modern. I don't really have that many pre-modern, unfortunately. Yeah, so that's the answer to that one. What do I think of Catholic exorcisms? I think they're legit, and I think there's probably going to be more and more of them coming in the recent years. I mean, you want to listen to the talks by Father Chad Ripperger. Listen to the talks by Father Chad Ripperger and you'll understand what's going on there. And really fantastic talks by him, by the way. Someone says their mum used to date Richter. Wow. Sort of a strange little anecdote. What else is coming up? Right, so I can go through a few things that are coming up as well. I've got an episode on Mikhail Bakhtin coming up. I've got one on Irving Babbitt and a few other little things that are the second part to Decline of the West is being uploaded. The Wittgenstein one on Hobbes. How much time do I spend each day reading? I would say between 4 and 6 hours a day. It's the bulk of the job. Because unlike some other podcasts, not all podcast hosts, but some others who are doing this kind of thing, not all podcast hosts are talking to people who have written books and theory, right? So it's not exactly fair to say that. But the ones that are, not all of them are spending the time reading the work. And I do like to try do that. So yeah, that's about how long. Some of that, usually about 2 hours of that is leisure. And I mean, I love reading. It's like one of my favourite things to do. So about 4 to 6 hours. Do I have a favourite philosopher, and how much of Kierkegaard's work? How much have you read of Kierkegaard's work? Favourite philosopher? If you're talking strictly philosophy, blimey. I would honestly, I think I would have to say Michel Serres, just for the beauty, the ability to to read it and sit and read it and be affected by it, and not always have this like nagging thing that you're missing something or that you have to. It's really the perfect balance of philosophy for me, that it's beautiful, it's poetic, it's emotional, it's also physical because he's talking about the flesh, he's talking about skin and senses a lot of the time, and it's also still intellectual. And if you want to go into that way, you can. And he's a very balanced, conscious, harmonious philosopher. But favorite, if we're to include anyone really, I mean, of course, I'm going to say Gurdjieff because he's just changed my life more than anyone. In a way, you could add a C.S. Lewis in there. Yeah. How did I take my notes at university, or did you just do the readings and write by memory? It depends what I'm doing. I mean, when I've done like the Kant lectures, and when I was studying Heidegger, really you end up almost, you type like a quarter of the page per page, in notes, just to get it. Some people learn just by reading it and understanding it. Some people do other things. I tend to have to almost teach it to myself, right? So that's the way that works best for me, is basically to go, right, I've read all that, now teach it back to myself as if I could then tell someone else. Like, all right, the only way to know that you've learned something is to be able to teach it. And when I'm doing my lectures and when I'm reading through my notes of talks, often I'll be reading through them and go, that makes sense. And when I'm saying it out loud, I realize, no, I don't really get that bit. And you really quickly find your gaps in knowledge doing it that way. Is hyper-reality an underrated concept in today's discourse? I'm really skeptical of all these terms which use hyper or late or like supra or whatever, when you go like hyper-capitalism or blah, blah, blah. It's like, the thing is the thing. Hyper-reality is like, well, that's reality. Because I get it as a useful definition, I guess, but I don't know exactly what would be meant, because it's one of those difficult terms where, like I said, I wouldn't know what would be meant by it. What's my understanding of the postmodern condition? Ultimately, relativism. And I mean, I think postmodernism is weirdly dying, and we're moving into sort of a, how like the polis political city-states of Rome were just this completely fragmented thing where basically you just get camps of people who draw a line around and say, we're this thing. I think we're just moving into that, and you're just going to find people who are postmodernists against people who are very sincere monarchists or sincere modernists or whatever it is. It's going to be quite beautiful, I think. And I mean, postmodernism, of course, was always going to die. I don't think it ever had life. It was sort of postmodernism was sort of inherently like a necromancer, right? It was like vampirically living off everything else. And you saw this when you went to galleries and things like this. It was like, this can't last. This is a terminal death cry of all meaning. It just can't last. Have you seen Adam Curtis's documentaries? Yeah, I've seen them, and I think they're really great introductions to a lot of the problems of today. I haven't seen his latest one, but Century of the Self was fantastic. Do I vote in elections? No, I don't vote. I guess I should explain that, but I just... for me, that's almost a Gurdjieffian thing now, right? Like, everything happens, no one does anything. Voting really is just a case of hypnotism. Like, who's the better hypnotist? Who's the least thrifty hypnotist, right? Who can get all the monetary backing behind them and prove to you something that you never cared about, that you suddenly do care about. And politicians, people need to really remember this with politicians, that being a politician is a job. It's not some almost transcendental divine position within society, like, oh my god, they're a politician, as if that's some high thing. It's a job. It's a cushy job with a nice wage, and you sit around all day and you talk, and you just get driven around, and you talk to constituencies or whatever, and you don't solve anything, and nothing changes. I don't vote because nothing has ever changed, which has affected me or anyone immediate to me's life in any discernible way. Not that I can not, like the biggest thing that probably happened that was literally like a physical noticeable change was school dinners got changed. And I think that's because of Jamie Oliver. And before people get up in arms and say, well, of course it didn't change to you. You're privileged. You're a privileged straight white male. So what? So there's. I come from a working class background that eventually became middle class, and I went through the system and I had all the same opportunities as everyone else, and I could have been lazy and I could have failed and I didn't. Blah blah blah. I don't for that reason, because it just doesn't change anything. And I don't think that's how power works. I mean, people with voting, you're saying like, can we have power? Well, that's not how power works. I'm behind a monarchy for that reason. That if you're going to be in charge, like, democracy doesn't work for this reason, right? Because the great paradox and annoyance and frustration for me of democracy is really encapsulated in the idea that when democracy fails, right? When a government gets voted in and they fail, people go, well, this is what we voted in, so the people are to blame. But when a government gets voted in and they succeed, now it of course is the party. It's the reason. The reason is the party this time. So democracy always has a get out of jail free card with regards to responsibility for itself. And yeah, I just think it's I don't think there's really any such thing, because as soon as you enter into that everyone has a say thing, then there's just an unfathomable amount of factors with regards to what is influencing people's minds, and some of them are very, very easy to control. Do you think the movement away from relativism will result in an objective system of meaning that isn't useful? That's a really good idea. I think the move away from relativism is more of a retreat, right? As in Saint Augustine talking about a retreat to God, and most people aren't. Unfortunately, like the horizons have already been drawn in a way, and most people aren't going to find stuff to going forward. I don't mean a retreat to the past. I mean a retreat to something that was already there in the first case, and everything else that was promised is bunk, and people just retreat. It's a retreat to the internal kingdom, and that where the objective values have always been, the ones that are obvious and always made sense, right? But I think I do see what you mean, and I think we were seeing this with sort of the some right and some left, and the attempts to somehow create. You just can't create an objective value system without God. You just cannot do it. You can say that you've got it, but you can't do it. Not voting is also very much in line with Junger's Forest Rebel. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the Forest Passage in Omishville, it's two huge inspirations. Two of my biggest inspirations in terms of my own politics and the evolution of those politics. Have I read The Essence of Nihilism by Emanuele Severino? No, I haven't, unfortunately. I want to read more of like serious nihilistic philosophy, like in terms of the actual theory of it, because I just don't see what they can do. Like, once everything's meaningless, like, why the hell are you even writing? Why bother? Huge Red Bull. Is Foucault's writing on biopolitics more relevant today than ever? It's extremely important, but it doesn't appear in the right places. Like philosophy's like someone who's still using a home phone. It's like it's just behind. It just, for some reason, just is always skeptical of the bleeding edge. Like, the problem with philosophy is that it can only really take something seriously once it's been solidified as something to take seriously by society or culture. And so you never have this bleeding edge of philosophy where like the conferences are always a little bit behind, and there's a lag. Philosophy has a lag. It has a time delay, and to catch that up, I think philosophy has become important again. But we've become very suspicious of manifestos and things which are trying to be of the future. What are some of the objective values that you think have always been there? Well, I personally don't believe I was ever taught not to kill. I don't think I was ever taught that. It appeared in teaching in school, 10 Commandments. But as I heard it, I thought, well, yeah, that makes sense. And what C.S. Lewis calls natural law, just this internal understanding of what is right, that has always been there. And anything else, I mean, the theological understanding of good and evil is that or the light and the darkness, if you want, is that goodness and light is already there, and evil can only ever be a bastardization, a mutation of good. Evil can't ever create anything of its own. Tolkien's fantastic on this, right? People go, well, the orcs just look like... It's like, yeah, the orcs are crappy men, right? They're a bastardization of the creation of God, right? That goodness has been, all evil can do is take something that the good made and ruin it. That's all it can ever do. And so the way you move away, and the way that natural law is ruined is just by these very long societal justifications. But ultimately there would be a point, I think, where some of them, especially when they're related to pleasure, are very easy to overlook and they're very easy to justify, even though you just instinctively know they're not right. But there's many that I wonder if society would ever be able to justify on like a collective level. Who knows? Maybe. Am I familiar with Giorgio or Agamben's? Sorry. Oh no, hang on. Do you think natural rights are the best basis for all laws? It seems like the Thomist natural rights are different than Enlightenment folks. I haven't read too much on natural rights. It seems like you're using very specific terms there, so I'll have to avoid that, unfortunately. Am I familiar with Giorgio Agamben's work, State of Emergency, Where Are We Now, etc.? If so, what are my thoughts on him? I know of Agamben, and I had a book called something Sovereign by Agamben that I started to read. I'd like to read his new one. I think he wrote one on the Garden of Eden or something like that, which was looked very, very interesting. Yeah, I'll probably give this chat another 20 minutes to half an hour. So any more questions that people have, let me know. And as it's a birthday, I think most of us will probably move into the Hermitix Discord and just chat there for most of the remaining night for anyone who's interested in doing that. I'm sure someone will link an invitation in the chat. So, yeah. Oh, here we go. Blimey. Do you get lonely? How do you stave off loneliness? I don't mean solitude exactly, more like a lack of fulfilling friendships and relationships. Yeah, man, it's the modern world, isn't it? Yeah, okay. I'm happy to go into this. I mean, there's a mystical, well, not mystical. There's an exercise given in a few texts where you are to watch your life as if it's a cinema, as if it's a film, you know. So when you're going about your day, you just watch your life as if it's playing. Usually what we try to do in life is we always try to direct the film that's playing. We always try like, oh no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. That was annoying. That was bad. I'm annoyed about that, or blah, blah, blah. And you try to change it in some way which is agreeable to you. And the exercise is really just to watch it, to be open to it, and just to allow it to be. And many people who watch this will understand from this and do this exercise. They'll understand that they may very well be lonely. They may see someone who's just doing everything on their own. They're sitting in on their own. They're going to the shops on their own. They're going to the gym on their own. And they're quite a lonely person. But from this, you can sort of realize that you can be lonely but not lonely. I don't know if that makes any sense. But a lot of energy can be expended. A lot of, let's say, like loneliness energy can be expended on the idea of being lonely, when the reality wouldn't change if you didn't expend that energy. So you can be lonely and not lonely. How do you stave it off? I don't stave it off. I mean, I've always got things to do. I think most people get lonely. Fulfilling friendships and relationships. I wouldn't worry so much about a lack of fulfilling friendships and relationships. I don't believe the average person has more than 3 or 4 fulfilling friendships, more than 3 or 4, or maybe up to 10 fulfilling relationships general. And I mean, I include friendships, deep friendships in that. Take up a lot of work and a lot of time, and to say otherwise, I mean, it's been one of the great tyrannies of the modern world of the idea of like friends on Facebook, right? Of people having hundreds and hundreds of friends. It's very tyrannous. It's just not how life is. And yeah. And I don't think you need to stave it off. You know, it's fine to be that way. I mean, once again, this is another one of the. I think this is in. A great book to read would be David Vincent's Solitude, where he talks about the rise of lone. Like, so we've always had solitude as a concept, but loneliness is, as I understand it, if I remember correctly, it's a relatively new and sort of semiotic invention, and you know, the idea of loneliness is a very modern phenomena in a very, especially over-socialized world. It's like one of those, you know, Krishnamurti once again, that it's to attune yourself to a sick society is no measure of health, right? So, um, in the same way, that idea of why do I feel lonely? It's like, well, who's telling me what it actually even is to be lonely, right? Especially in a very heavily over socialized society where they're like, dude, you should get out more. You should go here and here and here and here. And then you'd go those places and you hate them, right? That seems to be what most of the society is. And it's probably why so many people have to drink all the time to enjoy all the things that they don't actually enjoy. Just my own theory, though. So maybe I'm just a bitter hermit. Who knows? Someone said, happy birthday. Thank you very much. And thanks for the kind words about the channel. Hey, I have an embarrassing question. I feel like I'm too stupid to actually understand philosophy. I'm right there with you, man. This is why I do what I do. Even after having spent almost 5 to 6 years in trying to decipher what it really means, what must I do? I think that's a great question. It really is a great question. What to do with philosophy when... And a lot of people get in this bind, especially at the moment with popular philosophy, where people are literally they're recommending like Deleuze and Guattari and Heidegger and all these Foucault. It's like, I don't know. I would almost go back and read like Plato. For the five dialogues is a good entry point, or even the Republic, and go back to philosophers who have got clear, they're looking for truth. A lot of modern philosophers, don't always have a problem with them, but they're very caught up in some very minute details which they're interested in, which is fine now. But go back to philosophers who were really after that search of wisdom, that search of truth. Descartes, not so much Kant, but Descartes, Plato, Aristotle maybe. Go back to them. I think Descartes' Meditations is a great start because it's actually a very practical text that can be used even as meditations. I would start there. A good book, in a way, would be Anthony Kenny's History of Philosophy, which is like a sort of a better version of Bertrand Russell's, and it's very straightforward, and you can go through the history of philosophy and see what the trajectory and what the reason is. And if after that, I mean, another thing you could think of is a thing to do is, what is a problem that you yourself think, I wonder what that is. I wonder why it is I see things the way I see things, or how do I know what I know, and then find someone who's dealt with that. Yeah. Am I familiar with the nihilistic philosophical treatise, The Conspiracy Against the Human Race by Thomas Ligotti? Yeah, I'm familiar with it. And what are my thoughts on it? I'm familiar with it, and I think, to be honest, Ligotti deals with pretty much every thinker in that book in bad faith. If I remember right, he deals with Choron, Schopenhauer, Weininger, Nietzsche. And if I remember right, he doesn't deal with Choron very well at all. And he sort of condenses Schopenhauer into just the pessimistic thing. No, I didn't like it. I just thought it was like, it is what I call bleaker than thou thought, right? It's like you've sat down and you're like, how bleak, how nihilistic can I get? How bleak can I get? And the irony of nihilism is like, well, it isn't bleak, because if everything's meaningless, then there's no such thing as being bleak. And if everything's meaningless, then it can't mean anything that it is meaningless. Therefore, it can't be bad that it's meaningless. So why are you all so down all the time? Oh my God, it's all meaningless. Well, no, you can't act like that because it's meaningless. Fools. What are my views on understanding a text? How important is it to understand? Usually, the whole idea of understanding the text is a mass of overblown French nonsense from Barthes and Derrida. Read the text. Most of them are understandable in their own right. And this discussion I was having just recently was, always read the primary source text first if you're able to understand it. Then read the secondary, then listen to the lecture or whatever it is. Because 99% of the time, you're going to read it, you're going to come to your own conclusion, then you're going to go read the secondary, and you're going to think these thoughts. You're going to think, how in the world did this person come to this conclusion? That's what you're going to think, because it happens all the time. Come to your own conclusions about the text. The whole idea of understanding a text is usually a way to subsume something into an ideology that it was never meant to be part of. Really skeptical stuff on all of that. The hermeneutics of blah blah blah. Like just read the thing. Just read the thing. Do I sit or stand while meditating? Have I got a special cushion? What color is it? I tend to sit. As long as your knees are below your abdomen, you're fine. I just sit because I'm not very flexible, so I can't do the cross-legged thing. Who wrote the history of philosophy that I mentioned? I'll type it in the chat for you. Anthony Kenny. Anthony Kenny. Are the French philosophers Derrida, Lyotard, Deleuze, Foucault, etc., worth the time invested necessary to read the works? This is really tough question in a way. It's a bit of a pickle because, I mean, for instance, I haven't spent all that much time with Derrida, but I spent some time with. Oh, for God's sake, what the hell is? I mean, I've even forgot the name of it. It's the one which has system, structure, and whatever it is in it. And I just thought this is just wasting my time. Lyotard, on the other hand, I mean, it's really different. Lyotard's a huge variance because he's poetic at times. You have things like Libidinal and Economy, which I thought was like one of the most exciting, explosive philosophical texts ever. But whether or not it's worth someone's time is really subjective towards their what they're doing. What was I going to say? But then on the other hand, the Postmodern Condition by Lyotard is a very useful text. Deleuze. Foucault, Foucault's got like the good lord, the order of things, which is very tough work. But then you have something like Madness and Civilization, and the very useful books in a way. And really, these guys very much differ. One sec, let me just get the Discord link for you all. Oh, hang on. Yeah. Any further questions? There's a Discord link for you. Yeah, otherwise, blimey, it's almost been 2 hours. I'm amazed that people have listened. Yeah. But thanks, everyone. I mean, probably slowly winding down, but if any more questions come in, I will answer them. But thanks for all the support. The book is available on Amazon. Just type in "Be Not Afraid," James Ellis. It should come up. Much appreciated it. Anyone who's supporting the podcast, thanks very much. And anyone who's listening to this who really enjoys the podcast, then please think about supporting. Yeah, cool. That seems to be a good place to wrap it up. Someone said it's okay to be stupid. Just read. I'm in agreement, man. I'm in agreement. Am I interested in talking with Luke Smith? I was in emails with Luke Smith a while ago, and I was sort of excited about doing the episode, but it was I think Luke's sort of living, he's living the dream life out there. So and he sort of chats about these things. He chats about these sorts of things on his own anyway, so I don't think this conversation would add much. Yeah. Someone said, "Happy New Year. How old am I?" I'm 28. I know I don't look it. Someone said, "I just watched your course about the CCRU. Wouldn't mind buying it. It's a bit expensive." Blah blah blah. Yeah. Adam, if you email me here, I can help you out. Thanks all for the happy birthdays. Would you ever host a talk between two philosophers? It's quite difficult to host those sorts of talks, but I mean, if such a thing was happened, then maybe. I tried once to sort of facilitate it. It's quite difficult, and the time zones and things like that, and yeah, it's tough. But if it happened, I'd try. I did try with certain people once, and it ends up in a big email stream of difficulty. Am I familiar with the work of Henry Bortoft? No, unfortunately I'm not, but I'll add it now to the list of people. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to finish up the stream, and yeah, I'll be in Discord for anyone who wants to chat and chill for a bit. Thanks everyone for joining the stream. Yeah, thanks for all the support.